So you were telling me that in the United Kingdom, it's Lynx, not Axe body spray. Now, let me tell you why I believe that is the case. Now, an axe it's a tool. What else but a tool? Something that is used in warfare, which is a fundamentally masculine action.
I don't really feel like you're getting to the metaphorical substrate of this matter.
Metaphysical substrate.
I'm sorry.
You could try reading my books first.
Sorry.
All of them. And watching all of my lectures before you make... I feel like I'm being straw manned at this very moment. This is not appropriate.
Oh, man. I'm joined here today with my friend Drew McCoy, who runs the YouTube channel Genetically Modified Skeptic. You, of course, I would hope, know me as Rationality Rules, and both me and Drew have been pretty prominent in dealing with the movement that has been Jordan Peterson. So thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, it's so good that you're no longer doing the voice.
I started to get comfy with it,
Yeah, it's creepy. I've met like 5 people that can do it. And I mean, all you got to be able to do is Kermit the Frog, and then it's nailed. Talking of Jordan Peterson, who will obviously feature in this video, or we will be talking about Jordan, let's put it that way. Despite the fun that we're making, Jordan's an amazing person. He's very insightful. He's very intelligent. I've said that before, and I maintain it, because I personally think that while on the topic of religion, he is so intriguingly bad. In many other areas, he can speak some serious sense. Do you get the same feeling there, or?
That's actually a problem that I have with him. I mean, I would agree that he is brilliant, and he's definitely, if he was less, I don't want to use the word problematic, but I guess that's just going to have to suit this for right now. I think that he, either way, regardless of what ideas he was espousing, he has the ability to create a kind of intellectual revolution on the scale that he has kind of started, or a movement that he's begun to start at this moment. However, I would definitely not say that he's an amazing person without caveats. And I just, most simply put, I don't like him.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a fan. I don't care for Jordan Peterson in the least. Now, that said, I do think that he is not full of just bad ideas. And I think that pretending that he is just in an absolute quack and that he's not an actual intellectual is total nonsense. He has to be taken for what he is, which is some good and some bad.
Yeah, no, I completely echo that. He is some good and some bad. And me and you may fall in different areas of where we find value in what he's done and what he's saying. But it is important to make that clear, because one of the criticisms I've received, I don't know if you've got it before as well, it's, oh, you disagree with Jordan Peterson on the topic of religion or on this topic, therefore you're a leftist.
Right.
And I'm like, no, like I'm not at all. It's just, there's nuance here. It's just on these topics, I found him to be very, very weak. And that's why I've made 7 or 8 videos where if I was making it about anyone else, I almost feel like they would be on my side going, that's a terrible argument. So if Ray Comfort, for example, was to say that atheists are murderers, people would just be like having none of it. But when Jordan Peterson does it, it's all on me, I haven't read all of his work. I haven't digested all of his literature. It's a peculiar situation. But what I've got Drew here today to talk about is specifically the narrative, or the meta-narrative of the religious, and how it's changed over the last decade or two. And to me, it's a really interesting one. And I can't tell if I like it or dislike it. If you go back to the 15th century, or even not that far, we're in Texas, you don't need to go that far. What you find is people take their books literally. They literally believe that the earth was made in 6 days. Some people, especially when you go back not too far, that we are made in God's image. Evolution isn't a thing. You name the beliefs, homosexuality is wrong. It says it very clearly in Leviticus, for example. And it doesn't matter really about the religion, but people have always taken them, or used to take them more predominantly literally. And then as scientific advancement has happened, and we figured out a few things, such as, oh my gosh, the earth isn't flat. Oh my gosh, we're not the center of the universe, and evolution is true, and natural selection doesn't require a conscious agent in order to create what gives the illusion of, a creative agent. As that's went further, as our scientific advancements have occurred, the religious have changed their narrative, and it's become more about interpretation. And so they're able to read things such as the world was made in X days, and they can go, well, it depends on what you mean by day. And then go, because a day to God might mean something else. Or they might read where it says that homosexuals should be stoned to death. They might be saying, no, it's more about that the homosexuals may be, when they die, they won't be with God, they'll be somewhere else. You know what I mean? You see this like intellectual backflipping, which to anyone that understands psychology, it's cognitive bias, and there's many, many reasons for it. But with Jordan Peterson, and this New Age Christianity, as I've termed it, it's got incredibly vague. It's got to the point where you can basically be saying nothing. If you evaluate Jordan Peterson's views, for example, he doesn't believe in a literal God. He doesn't believe that Jesus literally resurrected. When he was asked if all humans were to die, they weren't to exist, would God still exist? His answer was, I don't know, which implies that he is saying it's something to do completely with the mind. It's a concept, it's ontological, if you will. It seems that the religious meta-narrative has went to this such a vague standard that it's given Deepak Chopra a run for his money.
Right.
How do we deal with that?
Well, the first thing you have to try to consider is whether this is the path that literalism takes to eventually die. Mm-hmm. Is this is the way that a religion devolves and eventually becomes something that ends up being able to uphold individualism and secularism? Or is it a way that religion is preserved in being able to espouse values that are harder to defeat, or ones that we are espousing in our culture these days, like secularism?
Yeah, it's like we're a social species, and while we can say that religion is a failed science, it's a damn successful community.
Right.
And it succeeds in many, many other areas. And maybe people really need to retain that. And that's what's causing these, well, perhaps we can take it really, really vaguely, and there's some way in which we can have our cake and eat it too. There may be an element there. It's interesting to hypothesize the idea that this is like the last stand of religion. It's being pushed back to the point where it's nothing, and then it will evaporate into nothing. I doubt that will happen. I don't know about yourself, just because I think while we may or may not always be religious, we'll always be, if you will, superstitious. We'll always be a species that sees patterns when they're not there.
I would say in a Durkheimian sense,
yeah.
If we have evolved to the point where we are no longer religious in a Durkheimian sense, then we're no longer Homo sapiens. That's something that is so far off in my mind that we'd be a different species.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I think it is built into us. The term pattern-seeking mammalian ape really resonates with me. We did not evolve. There's a really good example that was given by Richard Dawkins. I think it was in the God Delusion, but he said, if you're in the hunter and gathering situation and you hear a rustle, it's dark in a bush behind you, you either one assume that it's the wind, which is a more rational assumption to make because it is more likely to be the wind, or you irrationally always assume that it's an agent. There's a tiger in there. There's something that's going to get you. All it takes is for you once to go for the rational route and for the irrational route to be true. The tiger comes out and gets you,
right.
And if you haven't reproduced, you're pulled out of the spawning pool, and so irrationality is bred forward. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. And then if you add to that the fact that you have New Age-ism as a whole, with Deepak Chopra, who is very similar, in my opinion, when it comes to the topic of religion, to Jordan Peterson, that's kind of come from something new. So that would imply that this isn't where religions go to die. This is just a new sphere that we're going to have to deal with.
Well, I wonder about that. I wonder if this non-literalism is something that is actually has been in religion all along. And well, I would say that it has been something that's been a part of religion all along. But now the literalism and perhaps even some of the dogma is being whittled away. So we may be seeing some of religion as it has always existed being preserved in this, I would call it an adaptation rather than a revolution. Potentially this is a totally new change, but I wouldn't align myself with that position.
No. So one really peculiar thing to me is I've met many Christians who are massive fans of Jordan Peterson, but they actually are what I would call a Christian, which is to say that they actually believe that a God created the universe in some form. They actually believe that Christ resurrected.
Right.
And they don't know that Jordan doesn't. They haven't done sufficient research to figure that out. They've heard how loosely he speaks about things. They've ascertained value from that. And they're saying, yeah, he's really strengthened my belief. The guy doesn't believe anything like what they believe. So there's like this mismatch between these Christians who are holding him up as a strong intellectual for their purpose, and he doesn't believe what they believe. And I found it very peculiar when I show them the clips, when I make it very clear, Jordan doesn't believe what you believe. And even then they say, I'm not understanding Jordan. And I just find that when it comes to Jordan Peterson, Christians are doing to Jordan Peterson what Jordan Peterson does to the Bible. And that is that they can interpret anything he says in any way whatsoever.
Right.
And it becomes like playing chess with a pigeon, because we can't play the game. It's just they're knocking it over. And the sad thing is they're still trying to claim jurisdiction over our experience.
This is why I have a huge problem with Jordan Peterson, is I think that a huge portion of his communication, not all, but a huge portion, leads to this ridiculous, just absurd chess match.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
He's an excellent communicator in that he is great at telling stories and drawing people in. Obviously, I don't think that's up for debate in the least. As far as being able to communicate a message where people are understanding what he would describe as his intended message, I think he's a piss poor communicator.
I think so as well. So here's an interesting question. Is it deliberate?
That is the big question, because I can't say that I know. I've made videos talking about how basically quacks manipulate audiences, draw in audiences, and I've gotten some backlash, people telling me, no, he's not trying to do that. In those videos, I've made sure and purse it with, this does not have to be intentional.
No.
You don't have to be trying to manipulate people. You don't have to be trying to confuse people to do it and to follow a behavior pattern that can be described as a manipulation tactic that could be used purposely. I wish I could answer that question. Unfortunately, I can't. And I think that's what makes both of us want to keep talking about it. If this was a solved problem, then we would have already moved on.
I think from my research, and I think the answer is I don't know, because I don't. I have a strong hunch that it is on purpose, but it is for the greatest of intentions, because he doesn't strike me as a bad actor. Something that he's mentioned quite a lot is that he sees massive issues with subjective morality. I do as well. Like the speech I just gave at the Faithless Forum is where I'm trying to get people onto the side of realizing that morality is objective. We've just been looking at it wrong. Peterson's critique or criticism of subjective morality, where he says that it leaves people in this state where they're lost. They cannot say it's wrong to throw battery acid into the face of a little girl. All they can say is that it's culturally inappropriate according to me and the opinion of people in the same geographic region. That's useless. It means nothing at all, and no moral progress can be made from that. You couple that with the fact that the communities are being broken down at the moment, because if you lose your religion, especially seems the case here in the US, you lose your community, whereas that's not being filled. It seems to me with Jordan, he thinks, this is my suspicion, I must make that clear. It seems that he thinks that the best way to help people is to try and save what he says his father from the belly of the beast, and that means by bringing this back. I personally think that Jordan's just got it wrong. He's pushing his father further into the belly of the beast by doing this. I think the right thing is to encourage intellectual discourse and to start thinking about things differently. And with morality specifically, I think there needs to be a paradigm shift. But when it comes to whether or not he's doing it deliberately, we both don't know. I think that's fair to say. But it is such a strange situation to see. It seems that in the last 4 or 5 months, now this may just be me because I was sick and tired of watching him, so I've chilled, but it seems that there's not so many clips on the religion aspect that are going viral when it comes to Jordan Peterson. Is that your experience as well? Or
I'm pretty much in the same boat as you. I'm a bit burnt out on it, and so I couldn't say that I have an entirely informed perspective, but that seems to be my inclination. But I could be shown to be wrong.
Well, we both could be wrong because we're both now in this position where we're like, I'm done with being called a murderer. I'm done with being told I don't exist. You know,
Right.
I'm done with this situation. I'm done playing chess with a fucking pigeon.
Right.
Yeah, it is tiring. But it seems, let's assume that it is the case that it's dying down. It may just be that Jordan's tired. Jordan's been prolific and he's been doing lots of speeches, lots of work, and his conversations with Sam Harris they seem to be done for now. They're probably done for good because they were good conversations, and I personally feel that Sam did Sam. He did a really, really good job of going, hang on a second, you're moving your bishop off the board and flipping it round and doing this.
Right.
If it may just be the case now that it was a phenomena and now it's over. Do you think that's possibly true? Because the people that I knew that loved Jordan Peterson are not barking his name so much. Maybe they figured out that actually he is pretty vague. I don't know.
Well, to quote Jordan Peterson,
When you're surfing, you can't confuse yourself with the wave.
cue the vaporwave, right? But I do think that that is a great insight on his part. I don't know whether or not he was the impetus to this bit of a movement that we saw in his direction.
Yeah.
It may have just been started already, and he began leading it more swiftly in a certain direction. Now, the wave is maybe dying on its own. Maybe it's still going. Maybe it's going a different direction. Maybe it is moving away from where Jordan Peterson wants to go. So there is the wave here. There's Jordan Peterson. I know you're just thinking about the Vaporwave song right now, right? Right. Yeah, that's what you're thinking about. But there's the wave here, and it's still going. Maybe it's going a different direction, and Jordan Peterson has surfed off. That doesn't mean that it's a permanent disconnect. Maybe they'll be back together. Again, this is just my inkling. Yeah, this is the case.
Well, here's a question that kind of comes from there. Let's assume that there's still this big movement there, and that it's going to keep growing. Do you personally prefer having this conversation with people who, have a more literal interpretation of their religion versus the people that take this really, really loose weave, largely vacuous, metaphorical substrate interpretation, which basically can be weaved into anything? Which of those two do you prefer? Because I have an answer, and I'm really curious to what yours is.
I would say it depends on exactly what the conversation is. And what it comes right down to is falsifiability. If you are able to put your religion into a smaller and smaller box and hide God in a smaller and smaller place, just an infinite regress of smaller boxes, and to where it can never be thrown out. There is never something that could be shown to be false, which could change your mind. Then that's a problem. And that's a conversation where you are playing chess with a pigeon.
Yeah.
Now, on different issues, those two different categories of people will differ. When it comes to science, I almost rather talk to a fundamentalist, a literalist, because I find that their understanding of science, understanding of the facts are falsifiable.
They're playing chess.
And they're actually playing chess.
They're just really bad at it.
Right, and I can win. It may take some convincing that I have won, but maybe I would say I've beaten myself in chess with that very thing, because all of my ideas about science were falsifiable, and I came out of literalism because of that. And then there are people who are able to say, well, Genesis was all about order coming out of chaos, and that's the whole message. That's the entire thing. And because that's a good message, then we can take it seriously. It has served as a bedrock of Western culture. It has foundational principles within it, and we can take other messages that are within Genesis or in the Old Testament or even in the Bible entirely as something that should be seriously considered or seriously abided by, other than just history where we can learn from our mistakes.
Yes.
So really it just depends on the conversation, because it's really difficult to falsify something that can infinitely move around, where all the chess pieces can be completely off the board, and there are no rules to abide by at that point.
Good answer. No, I definitely would. I share it. The thing that I would add, and perhaps you're of the same opinion, is I would prefer that the world is more, or the world of religion is more towards Jordan Peterson's views on a practical evaluation. The reason being is that I find that people that do believe in these vague, vacuous things, they are not as much claiming jurisdiction over my experience.
Right.
They're not so much. You could class them as quite liberal, and for that, it's like, you know what? I can live in a world where, as long as you're not claiming jurisdiction over me, I'm like, you play with your toys. I'm good. Like, if you believe nonsense, it's a bit like people that touch wood at that point. It's not true, but you're not hurting anyone, and I'm not going to go out my way to be an ass, basically.
So it really depends on the conversation you're having. And if you're having a conversation about LGBT rights, then you can often ally with people, maybe not so much Jordan Peterson specific ilk, but people.
No, but someone off that interpretation.
Right.
Absolutely.
Someone of that methodology. Yes. And you can be an ally with them and stand for similar principles, similar values. And it's not so much the same with a fundamentalist type. But if you're talking if you're just talking about a debate, I'd rather debate someone that I can show to be wrong in 30 seconds than someone where I have to speak with them for 4 hours before they realize we're not even defining our terms the same way.
So ultimately, we don't know which one is going to be better for us, whether or not people go more literal or whether or not people go more metaphorical. And we know that they have different practical and intellectual consequences. Right. And they're kind of like polar opposites in that sense. But despite what we think, we haven't got much choice but to encounter it when it comes.
Right.
And I want to say that I'm really happy to have you helping me in this situation, because when I was making this content, I was largely alone, and some very intellectual powerhouses weren't really criticizing Jordan Peterson or this new kind of new age Christianity. And then when you popped up and you were doing it, I was like, that's an ally. That's awesome. So
I'm glad that you see me as an ally rather than someone trying to rip off your content. Because just to be fair, all of my content came after Steve's, or most of mine did. But yes, thank you for seeing me as an ally.
Nah, not at all. I was just like, great. People were picking it up and they're doing it very, very well. And I'm glad that you've seen a growth with me, because that implies that there is a demand of people that are quite sick of this stuff,
right,
and they want to hear good ways in which to deal with it. So they want to know how to play chess with a pigeon.
Precisely.
Pretty much. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's always an honor to be on your channel.
Keep making awesome content. It's amazing to see you in the flesh as well. And if you'd like to finish by saying anything in your Jordan Peterson amazing voice, I would not be against it.
I've been thinking about this for perhaps 4 to 5 months now. And I've been staying away from sulfites. That's what's been helping me out now. I think that these two people having this conversation embodies what the Virgo sign of Gemini may reflect in ancient mythology and literature, and that is two people.